So just wanted to thank you all for coming and to thank T2F for having us here. It's our first event in Karachi, so we're quite excited to be here. I'm just going to introduce myself first. I'm Mariam Faruqi. I'm a lawyer. I'm a UK-based lawyer who specializes in immigration law and human rights, so public law and judicial review. And I've recently gone to Delhi to take up a position at iProbono, which I'm going to be telling you about. And I've also worked in Pakistan. I'm from Pakistan. So that's what brings us here today. And my colleague Salman Zaidi will also be joining me in the discussion. And he's been working with iProbono for about a year now and is a member of our board of advisors. So just a little bit about iProbono. What is it and what do we do? We're an organization that works to bridge the gap between civil society and access to quality legal aid. And when I talk about legal aid, I mean either free access to legal advice for members of civil society, for organizations and individuals, or subsidized legal advice. As we all know, legal advice can be pricey and costly, and it can be prohibitive to people who want to access lawyers or the courts. So what we're trying to do is, through our work, is to institutionalize a culture of pro bono from within the legal community. We want to strengthen and professionalize the charitable sector, i.e. NGOs, civil society organizations, and social entrepreneurs. We also want to provide civil society organizations access to free professional legal advice easily. And by that I mean high quality legal advice, which is provided in a timely fashion and which ends up bringing results to the organizations that we're working with. We want to ultimately enable access to justice for the underprivileged. We work in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh in South Asia, but where our head office is in London. So we started off in London in 2009. We were set up by a lawyer who thought that we should all be doing a lot more pro bono work. We were incubated by a corporate law firm in London called Field Fisher Waterhouse, and they very kindly gave us their premises for free, and we all worked for free on specific cases. We're still housed at Field Fisher Waterhouse in London. In 2010, we moved to Delhi. High Court lawyer Swati Sukumar took on the iProbono mantle over there. The office has been functioning now for about 6 years. We have 10 employees who work specifically for iProbono over there. They conduct the core of our legal work, which I'll be telling you a bit about in a minute. And we also have a panel of 20 High Court lawyers and 6 Supreme Court lawyers who focus on our work with children. Globally, we also have a presence in South and Central America, a little bit in Africa now as well, where we're running some projects, but those are all very satellite pieces of work which we run through our electronic network. Just by way of figures, we have 50,000 lawyers on our network, and I'm hoping that any of you who are lawyers here will log onto our website and register your interest. We have 1,400 organizations across the globe that we're working with. We have 880 projects. I'll explain to you what projects are in a bit. And we work across 35 countries, but the core of our work is in South Asia. We have saved civil society organizations approximately $9 million in costs for legal services over the 6 years that we've been functioning. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of civil society organizations and NGOs that we work with. They're our partner organizations. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the core of our legal work. So I'll pick an organization at random from this selection. So Good Thinkers Organization is an NGO based in Kasur. They are run by lawyers, and they provide legal advice mainly to children and the transgender community in Kasur. They're doing some fantastic work. We contacted Good Thinkers, went down to visit them, and asked them what their core transactional legal needs were. By core transactional legal needs, I'm referring to very sort of corporate needs that any organization might have. So, for example, advice on trust deeds or advice on human resources strategies, purchasing a property, for example. So what we did for Good Thinkers Organization, for GTO, we reviewed their human resources policy for them, and we're also assisting them with a manual on various of their other legal policies. So as you can see, this is very standard work, but it assists an organization to capacity build, to work with their staff in a more positive way. We're also hopefully going to be now moving on to assist them with some grant applications that they're going to be making. I'll pick another organization. I'll go for an Indian organization now. So Mumbai Mobile Creches, based in Mumbai, they provide the children of slum workers with daytime childcare. So mothers who go to the building sites of Bombay, and you see them in movies sometimes carrying bricks on their heads. We provide their children, or rather Mumbai Mobile Creches provides their children with daytime care. What we did for Mumbai Mobile Creches was, again, we helped them with their human resources policy. We helped them purchase a property for their creche. So we advised them from identifying the property through to organizing the lease. We connected them with lawyers in Bombay. Similarly, going back to GTO, we connected them with lawyers in Lahore, which was the nearest big city. Now, all the legal advice that's provided through our network of lawyers is provided for free. So none of these organizations have to pay a penny in legal advice. I'm going to move on to the International Justice Mission, which works in Africa, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. They're an organization that rehabilitates and rescues female victims of human trafficking. We assisted them with 2 litigations, in Bombay, on behalf of trafficked women, and again, we managed to get them their legal advice for free. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of work that we're doing with organizations. Our work in Pakistan is at its very early stages. We've got about 800 projects running in India right now, and I'm really hoping that we can get some more projects running in Pakistan. I'm going to move on swiftly to our litigation work. Now, it's taken us about 5 years in India to get to a position where we can represent individuals at the High Court level. So, just by way of background, about 3 years ago, we had a young woman whose daughter had been very severely sexually abused at the age of 3. Again, this woman worked on a building site, and her young daughter was represented by us in the High Court. She had failed at the lower court level and was seeking redress, and we took her case through successfully to the High Court, managed to get the perpetrator convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison, and we managed to get the young girl compensation to help her go to school and sort of recover from the injuries that she had sustained. So that was really the start of our child rights work in India. More recently, we've had several cases, but I wanted to highlight this one. It's the case of Akash, who is an 11-year-old, he was 11 years old when the crime happened. He was in 2011, he was sexually assaulted by 4 other children at his school. His parents sought redress and managed to get compensation through the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. It's a new piece of legislation in India. It was sort of in the process of being passed through Parliament when Akash was assaulted. It was passed, and his mother managed to get him compensation through that. However, because of the definitions in the law in India, there's a difference between grievous sexual assault and rape under the legislation in India. So technically, a male cannot be raped in India. They can only suffer grievous sexual assault. And this meant that under the current legislation, Akash was only able to get 50,000 rupees in compensation, whereas if he had been a female child victim of the same offences, he would have obtained approximately 3 lakhs. So the parents managed to get the 50,000 rupees, but Akash had sustained severe disabilities through the crimes that had been perpetrated on him, and they just thought this wasn't fair. So HUC, which is a child rights organization and who were aware of Akash's case, contacted us. We've done several cases with HUC, and we're actually litigating on behalf of them in court on about 3 other cases. They contacted us, and 3 of the lawyers from our panel put in a writ petition in the High Court to challenge the current compensation scheme, and we managed to have the compensation reviewed in the High Court. We got an excellent order from the judges, which basically said that now there is no monetary limit to compensation for minor survivors of sexual abuse. So they took away the gender difference, i.e., whether you're a boy or you're a girl, you are eligible for fair and equal compensation. We're not 100% pleased with the decision because it's going to be, compensation is still going to be decided on a case-by-case basis. We're hoping to get a sort of across-the-board limit on compensation, which is fair and equal. But what we do feel is that we managed to get our client, Akash, effective, affordable legal advice through our panel of lawyers, and that was really our key aim, and we're progressing with several other cases. I'm not going to go into details on the other cases. Perhaps in the discussion, if you have any questions about them, I can tell you a bit more. But just by way of summary, we're also defending journalists in court who've been accused of defamation by the government. We've also got some cases running in Bangladesh, for example, on behalf of the bloggers that were attacked. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news in Bangladesh. So that's just a summary of cases, and please ask me more questions about it, but I don't want to take up too much of your time right now. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Salman Zaidi, who's going to tell you a bit about our work in Pakistan. Yep.
Thank you. Can I be heard all right? I'm Salman Zaidi. Thank you, Mariam, and thank you to T2Web for providing us a venue for having conversations that are constructive and constantly provide us an intersection of critical conversations that sort of do inform the future in Pakistan. And I say this while being cognizant of the landscape, as Mariam calls it, the bad old landscape of Pakistan that is frequently affected by violence and conflict. And this morning we heard of the attacks in Quetta. But back again to this intersection of ideas that creative spaces allow us and that take shape and volume later on. What I take from what Mariam said and the experiences in India, we tried applying that to Pakistan and seeing if there can be any success in the pro bono domain, so to speak. I'm a researcher. In my interest, my background has been in foreign policy and conflict research, which is why my sort of vocabulary on conflict and how it is having an outsized influence in how youth policy particularly, or how social enterprise, intellectual enterprise impacts what we are able to do. So when we started scoping for iProbono last year, and back then Mariam had just come back from England, and she was saying, can we start something of the sort in Pakistan? She's a lawyer, I'm not, although I'm wearing a black coat, and perhaps the only one in the room who is. There are, of course, different strands of law. They are, so corporate lawyers have very different thinking, tax lawyers think very differently too, human rights work. But that is the first domain where we did start, right? We reached out to NGOs last year with an interest in finding out what challenges NGOs have. And it emerged that they have very similar concerns to any new startup or any sort of corporate organization that's looking for what to do with their tax, what to do with acquisition of property, what to do with human resource challenges, contracts that can be looked at, fairly mundane work. And that's where the resource of iProbono steps in. And there's a network of lawyers across the world, right? So Mariam mentioned there's presence of lawyers in South Asia. There's a whole lot of lawyers across the world who step in and do free legal work. We mashed this up with lawyers in Pakistan, and there was immense interest. Environmental lawyers stepped in, human rights lawyers stepped in, etc., and said, we'd like to help NGOs. You identify them for us, and we would like to assist them. So the first year was spent in matching up projects. But we quickly realized that the domain of human rights is fairly specific. There is some, NGOs working in human rights sometimes have enough wherewithal. Startups are another area where people are, and young people in particular, are looking for help. How do you register your company? What happens to intellectual property rights? Things like that. So the answers we don't have, because many times legislation hasn't really worked out, especially for intellectual property rights, as we learned over the course of the last year. Environment is a domain where a lot of work needs to be done. You can count the numbers of lawyers who are working there. And this is separate from activism, right? So we take positions as activists, but as professionals, we are confronted with legal regimes that need arguing through. And we need to connect with the lawyers at very senior levels, but at mid-tier levels and at junior levels also. So, the work of putting all of this together takes a huge amount of resource that junior lawyers will do for you. Senior lawyers will help connect you at Supreme Court, High Court levels. So it's each case is specific, and it's what you're working with. Some lawyers said to us, we'd like to work on something big, right? So don't bring to us a document that needs to be corrected. And we respect that. We understand that senior lawyers do not have so much time to spend. So they'll.
Interrupt for a second.
Please do.
Yeah. Although we do have several senior lawyers who are quite happy to review contracts and review documents, we've also got PhD students who are happy to do research on behalf of NGOs and other CSOs. So it is very dependent, I think, on the individual and what they're interested in. Yeah. Absolutely.
So while I sort of give you a breakup of what our experiences have been, this is with the caveat that the landscape of social enterprise itself, of new startups is expanding. And when I do read research coming up in Pakistan on what startups are looking like, the trends are fairly encouraging. It doesn't compare to population cohorts, similar population cohorts in other parts of the world, or GDPs or economies that are similar. But even so, the trends are fairly encouraging. So one goes for those areas or spheres where you can assist, and that's where iProbono does intend playing a role. This is, of course, with a huge amount of appreciation and admiration for the pro bono work already going on in Pakistan, right? Many of the lawyers we spoke to said, we already have, a pro bono gig on the side. So we said, we admire this, but let's sort of become a clearinghouse. So the intention is to coordinate these conversations. And oftentimes, I take this room as a sample size. If there are ideas in this room on new ideas, new technology, new apps that people need to develop, new or even NGOs that are suffering, that don't know what to do with their tax, new startups where you would like to connect somebody with how to resource their idea, not just legally, but in a larger sense, right? We track ideas from India. We're looking at South Asia research-wise. And we find that there is much more depth in terms of resource. So we'd like to replicate some of that in Pakistan. And we'd like for your ideas here, and we'll just sort of break this up into a Q&A in a few minutes, and learn from you what your experience is. Seed Ventures is of course one of our partners who has sort of helped us create that entire domain in a sense. They're working in parts of the country where new startups are getting into. I'm personally very excited about new startups. I'm interested in the story of youth in Pakistan because I research it, and I find that it is a vanguard against radicalization because I am a conflict researcher. So we'd like your ideas on what you think new creative resource can be, not just for startups, but all organizations that you know about. And if you are lawyers, we'd encourage you, like Mariam said, to look at what iProbono has been doing in other parts of the world. And if you are doing pro bono work on the side, tell us about it, because we will be very encouraged. With that, thank you very much.
There's just a little final bit that
Please
I
go ahead.
just mention before
Thank you.
we open it up for discussion. Really, to follow on from what Salman's been saying, we launched here about a year ago, and this is our first trip to Karachi. So we've had some great traction in Lahore. a little bit in Islamabad. The lawyers in Islamabad are a little lazier than the lawyers in Lahore. And we're really keen to strengthen our network of lawyers. So pass on the word to any legal colleagues. We've got a registration section on our website, or just please be in touch with me. And we'd love to connect you to some of the really interesting NGOs that we're working with. And as a corollary to that, our main aim is to provide relevant transactional services to our partner organizations and then work towards getting some of the bigger litigation going. So please volunteer your time. And finally, we're going to be establishing a legal fellowship here in Pakistan. We've managed to cobble together some funds from our international donors. I should mention that most of our work is done through volunteers. I've volunteered for iProbono for 2 years, and while all our legal advice is free, we've got very basic running costs in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, and that's covered by the Ford Foundation on a rolling grant, and also until recently by the Commonwealth Foundation. So through that, we're able to fund a small fellowship. You can find out details of that on our website, and if you want to talk to me about that, please do after the event. And that's really it. So I'm going to let Salman sort of lead the discussion, as it were, but I hope you have questions and ideas for us.
If you could identify yourself, introduce yourself, and bring to us a question. Are there any questions in the room?
Hi, so my name is Heba Thapani, and so I'm a lawyer based in Karachi. I am exceptionally interested in the work you're doing because so I run a very small legal aid initiative in Karachi. We started last year in August. We started through Zabas University, which has a law program. And essentially the sort of graduates of the program, recent graduates and students kind of came together and said that we wanted to start a project whereby we could spend some of our time dedicated to doing pro bono work. And when you're kind of fresh out of law school, you're very passionate about this kind of area of law. So I did practice in civil litigation for a year and a half at a firm, and I just recently left, so I could kind of dedicate more time to this project. But like one of the main issues as a junior lawyer that I'm experiencing, because obviously we're trying to get a team together and we're very, very sort of in our beginning stages, is just that people don't have the time. And especially junior lawyers who are the ones who are very enthusiastic about it, and there are some in this room I know, and they want to give their time to, and especially as alumni of Zabist as well, they're kind of, not just passionate about the work that we're doing, but they're affiliated with the university, so they have this kind of emotional connection, but they simply don't have the time. And of course, the fact is because you're a startup, we have limited, if no funding, so we're not offering any monetary compensation at all, essentially. So how do you work around that? Or like how would iProbono work around that?
Well, a couple of things. Firstly, do be in touch with us about sort of supporting your work, for sure. There's always time. We're all busy. All lawyers are busy. We all charge a lot of money. And I think when I started practicing, the hardest thing was we were charging people so much money, and then there were lots of people who needed the legal advice but couldn't afford it. So I think for lawyers, the thing to do is to talk to your partners, to talk to your firm and the management within your firm, because I know that in Pakistan there's no sort of formalized, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no formalized structure of pro bono. In London, we all have to put in a certain number, in England, we also all have to put in a certain number of hours pro bono every year, right, to move on to our next year of qualification. Pretty much all firms, however big or small, but certainly the big corporate firms have a CSR policy. So I would encourage young lawyers to speak to the partners, and I would imagine that they'd only be impressed by the fact that you'd want to do pro bono work. I don't know. But the other thing to do is, I do also appreciate the time factor. I do believe that people have time, but you have more time if you're working with other people. So rather than taking on a project alone, it's always really useful to team up with other people, either within your firm or if you're a student, with your student body. So 3 people working on a case. So i.e. like a legal clinic style style case plan, is much more useful than just you sort of sitting there on your own trying to struggle with legal problems, etc. And then of course, iProbono at the moment, we're not doing any lower court or trial court level work. We intervene at the high court level. We are aiming to develop a network which is capable of intervening at the lower court level, but we always work in a team. We've got lawyers within the iProbono team who partner up with the firms. So there's always more power in a team. So those are my pieces of advice to you, but definitely be in touch, because if there's any way that we can support you, then we'd be happy to do that.
I'd just like to add to that.
Yeah.
There's been one organization in Islamabad, Pakistan Youth Change Advocates, who wanted to change their founding documents and approached us. And this was fairly straightforward. We did go out and sort of reach out to at least 2 or 3 different lawyers before one of them said, yes, I can take this on, I have enough time. And even at that, there was a team working on it. It wasn't too much work, but even so, we do appreciate that there are constraints on time. One thing that we do take seriously is that there has to be quality control. So our job is really to step in and say, hey, you've let this organization in the lurch. It's really, our job is to match lawyers with projects so it has to be populated both sides. You can't just have a huge resource of lawyers and no projects, essentially. So we do ask, while we're talking to lawyers, we are in touch with NGOs as well, with organizations as well. Do you have concerns? Do you have problems? Please bring them to us. And then the volume of the problem is, of course, so it's fairly case specific. Are there other people in the room who've done pro bono work and like to share a perspective?
Okay, my name is Sibgatullah Sheikh and I'm running a software house. I'm not bounded to any place right now, and my question is related to NGOs. Okay, suppose if we do something for NGOs, like there are some particular problems that NGO face regarding law. So I would like to know that what sort of NGO problems are there in law of, I don't exactly, okay, my question would be like this, that what problems that NGOs face in Pakistan and what we can do in order to improve that. That's it.
Yep, that's a really great question. And it's something that we are always explaining to our NGO partners when we approach them. I think the first thing to say would be that actually a lot of NGOs in Pakistan don't initially face such different problems from NGOs in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, etc. I'll speak from a bit of India experience, which I'm not sure is that great in the current political climate, but the government is really tightening down on NGOs in India. The registration rules have recently changed, the rules on foreign funding, etc. have recently changed. So we've brought out a manual for NGOs on really basic things like how do you register under the new laws, etc. I would imagine that, not that I would imagine actually, organizations in Pakistan are also approaching us requesting legal advice on very basic registration issues. I would say it's the same in England. I think the regime in England is regulated very closely by the Charities Commission, and it's fairly standardized and fairly accessible, unlike, I think, the regimes here and in India. Similarly, in Bangladesh, the government is cracking down on NGOs in a similar way. So I think basic registration issues. Then trademark registration, for example, it's not something that I had really thought about when I started this work, but a lot of NGOs contact us to help us with their trademark registration. Staffing, I've referred a lot to employment policies in HR. I think it's one of the key issues that NGOs face and one of the key problems. How do you staff? Once you have staffed, how do you look after your employees? How do you deal with employee complaints? How do you deal with issues of sexual harassment within the workplace? We're dealing with 3 cases right now linked to sexual harassment within the workplace in an NGO sort of environment. If an organization doesn't have appropriate policies in place, it's going to be really hard for them to dismiss someone on grounds of sexual harassment, or B, protect one of their employees who is accused without grounds. So does that sort of answer your question?
Can I just add to that? I'll just add
Yeah.
like one perspective added to that. It's so inside the NGOs have gotten corporatized over the last 10 years. I've come from Islamabad, where we do work with implementing organizations, many of them, and depending on their capacity and where they stand in the sort of value chain, it's how corporatized they are. That's just a function of their internal capacity. I do sort of the environment in Pakistan for NGOs has gotten difficult. It's not like there is much more scrutiny. The other thing is that what area or domain the NGO applies in, and that's stuff that we can't help with. If you're working on the forefronts of human rights, if you're working in jails, if you're working with legal stuff, I mean, that's stuff that we can't intervene. That's not our expertise. It's not our place also. But we do have expertise from the SECP, and I'll just refer this to a colleague here. 1 second.
Actually, I will answer the question that he has asked. It's not my mandate to answer him, but and suggestion for you also. Actually, I am managing executive at Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, which registered non-profit organizations like NGOs. So after the Black Hawk operation in Pakistan, and there is many problems for NGOs registration, and Home Ministry is also involved in the registration process. So SCCP is a professional organizations which registers and all not-for-profit organizations, and if you have any issue regarding the registration, I can assist any startup non-profit organization in registration process.
Please sign up.
Okay.
Be great to have you on our circuit, as it were, on our network, because we need people like you.
Okay, I work voluntarily in this. Thank you.
Okay, can I ask one more question?
Please.
Okay, the question is this, that suppose I register an NGO under SECP, and what happens is this, that government starts, see, if my interest and government interest collapse, see, like they are both fighting with each other, right? Like corruption thing comes in between, then what should I do? That's my problem.
Actually, your interest does not contrast with the national security.
No, it will not at all.
This is the main thing. Government, the Home Ministry is saying that NGOs interfere in our national affairs, like the Save the Children issue was raised.
Okay.
So if there is another social issue on your work, then government, I think, will not interfere.
Okay, let me complete my question. My question is this: suppose if I am doing something in order to do things to promote something or do something good, but see, the political leaders who are working and they got some sort of problems with me, then what should I do? Where should I go?
See, registering an NGO is not difficult, but
No,
the domain and the politics of your organization is really your own. So that's not where iProbono can assist you. And I think that's where a lot of NGOs I do understand your question, and that's where a lot of NGOs take slack from the government or other agencies. That's really their own politics. That's not an area that we can step in, and I do take my colleague's point on national security. That is the sort of critical challenge for NGOs these days, particularly from Islamabad. Do we have other questions in the room? Yes.
Hi, I'm Palvisha Shahab. I'm a lawyer and work for the Human Rights Commission in Pakistan. I have two questions. First, I'm wondering what the timeline on this lawyers panel connecting to the NGOs is, because we're starting a Human Rights Defenders program, which aims to give emergency legal assistance and non-emergency legal assistance to human rights defenders in particular. This sometimes means, immediate bail, pre-arrest bail, this, that, and the other. So A, this would sometimes happen to be in the lower courts, and B, a lot of times we'd need immediate sort of connections. Is there a sort of timeline on this, A? And B, with regards to governments cracking down and new registration policies and funding scrutiny and such. So we've had a Supreme Court order that's directed the Interior Ministry to re-register all the organizations and then continue to do so on an annual basis. If there's a manual or something that's been prepared, can that be shared? Because there might be similarities that we can draw from.
No,
thank you.
Thanks for your really interesting questions. Just in regard to your first question, in terms of timelines, it depends very much on the situation. So earlier this year, I think it was in February, we held a workshop for lawyers in the trial courts, in fact, in Qasur, on bail applications and on emergency bail applications, how they can make more successful and timely bail applications. And that was led by Sarup Ijaz, who's a lawyer in Lahore. And you must be in touch with him, I'm sure you are. So in terms of time scale, if immediate help is required, ideally we would be able to source someone fairly quickly. Again, in India and Bangladesh, where I'd say our panel of lawyers is much larger, we work far more quickly. And I'm hoping that that's going to happen in Pakistan as well. But in the Punjab district, I would say we've got a good selection of people who could be at hand quite quickly. Because I know for bail applications, time is of the essence, right? Then similarly with the manual, we haven't got a manual going for Pakistan. We've completed a manual in India on registration. We're in the process of completing a manual in Bangladesh, and something that I'd really like to do in Pakistan, and hopefully through the fellowship we can get someone to engage in that. So I don't know, perhaps we could speak about that afterwards as well and be in touch about that, because it is essential. And giving NGOs very sort of basic legal advice. It's not supposed to be complicated, but just giving step-by-step advice in a sort of accessible manner, similarly in the right languages. So any documentation produced in English would be translated. We've had stuff translated into Bangla, stuff is being translated into Hindi, and certainly in Pakistan we'd have documents translated into Urdu to make them more widely accessible. So thanks.
Any other questions?
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरा नाम सोहेल अहमद है, मैं कानून के शोबे से वाबस्ता हूँ। मैं एक आइडिया देना चाह रहा था कि सिंध में एजुकेशन पे बिल्कुल प्रो बोनो काम नहीं हो रहा
जी। तो
सिंध एजुकेशन आर्डिनेंस है, कंपलसरी आर्डिनेंस है, उसमें बिसाइड्स बहुत सी चीज़ें अच्छी हैं। उसमें एक ये भी प्रोविजन है कि अगर जो प्राइवेट स्कूल हैं उनको सर्टेन कोटा पुअर आबादी के लिए, कच्ची आबादी में जो डिज़र्विंग स्टूडेंट होते हैं उनको भी स्कूल में एडमिशन देना चाहिए, मगर किसी भी स्कूल में ऐसा ऑब्ज़र्व नहीं होता। बड़े बड़े स्कूल हैं, यहाँ हमारे यहाँ सेंट माइकल स्कूल है, इनके करीब ही कच्ची आबादी है, हजरत कॉलोनी बड़ी आबादी है, वहाँ डिज़र्विंग पुअर जो फैमिलीज़ के लोग हैं उनको एडमिशन देना चाहिए उस ऑर्डिनेंस के तहत। अगर इस पर काम किया जाए तो उनके भला हो सकता है। दिस इज़ माई आइडिया।
नहीं, ये बहुत अच्छा आइडिया है जो आप कह रहे हैं। और वैसे हम लोग अगेन मैं इंडिया का एग्जांपल दूंगी, वहाँ पे हम लोग स्टर एजुकेशन के साथ काम कर रहे हैं और प्रथम के साथ भी काम कर रहे हैं। और उनके थ्रू प्रथम जो काम करता है वहाँ पे, वो उन्होंने स्कॉलरशिप्स शुरू की हैं बच्चों के लिए वहाँ पे, और उनको दाखिला मिलता है प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में। आई एम नॉट श्योर इफ़ दैट इज़ द राइट वे फॉरवर्ड, बट सर्टनली यहाँ पे भी पाकिस्तान में भी हम मिलना चाहते हैं ज़्यादा एजुकेशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के साथ, एंड इट्स अ वेरी गुड आइडिया दैट यू गिवन। जी,
कंपलसरी है कि जो भी प्राइवेट स्कूल्स कॉलेज वो पुअर लोगों के लिए कोटा रखेंगे, वो ऑब्जर्व नहीं हो रहा, और ये उनके लिए अगर नहीं तो पेनल्टी प्रोवाइडेड की गई है
बिल्कुल।
तो प्रो बोनो में ट्रायल कोर्ट में आके डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट्स में जाके रेमेडी ली जा सकती है इस पर अगर काम किया।
Oh, it's a potential public interest litigation.
सर नेटवर्क जो है आप शायद मालूम होगा, जो कि एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशंस का सारा एक वो है, एक्टिविस्ट भी हैं उसमें, देर हेडक्वार्टर्ड इन इस्लामाबाद। असर नेटवर्क जो है वो बहुत अरसे से काम कर रहा है, उनकी रिपोर्ट आती है हर साल। जी, जी बिल्कुल। देखिए ऐसा है कि जब तक इदारे या NGOs हमें ख़ुद अपने चैलेंजेस नहीं बताएंगे, हम इंटरवीन नहीं कर सकते। हमारा सिर्फ काम इस हद तक लिमिटेड है कि हम उनको एक्सपर्टीज़ वो दे सकें, लेकिन उनकी फील्ड में क्या चैलेंजेस हैं वो वी आर इन नो वे टू असिस्ट और करेक्ट दैट।
Star Education and Pratham, they both approached us with their with their legal problems. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Is there actually, please go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Asad and I've been practicing in the lower courts for over a year. So I believe there's a lot of potential for pro bono work in Karachi's city courts and everything. So what exactly is your line of action or plan of action about that and going about it?
So our initial plan, it's a really good question, and our initial plan of action here is to widen our network of lawyers, so get people like you onto our network of lawyers, I think our main issue over here has been lack of ground presence. It's all great that we have an international network, etc., but we really need more people who are educated in Pakistan and are working in Pakistan and want to actually do pro bono work in Pakistan. So we started working in Lahore and Islamabad with lawyers. We sort of built up a small network there. We're still developing our network there. So really, I would say first line of action is to get more Pakistani lawyers on board. Now, what we found in Islamabad was that a lot of the young lawyers were coming to us, so lawyers at your stage who were working in the trial courts, and basically saying to us that, look, we really want to do pro bono work, but our seniors, A, don't give us the time, and B, they don't give us the support or the training. So that's another thing that we're quite keen to establish so we started with the criminal law training earlier this year for the lawyers in Qasur because that's what they wanted and that's what they asked for. So if we can help capacity build and help train lawyers by getting trainers in, and I don't mean getting trainers in from abroad, I mean getting senior lawyers who are practicing here in Pakistan to support you guys in your work, that's something that we'd really like to do. And what I'm hoping at sort of in February next year is to have some more training sessions in Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad, which can really help young lawyers to go out there and do more proactive pro bono work. I mean, the other thing is that we only get to know about what sort of pro bono work you're interested in if you tell us, right? So we've got several organizations on our network, and we can link those up with you say if you're interested in environmental law and you want to work on an environmental law issue or with an environmental law NGO, then we can connect you with that and we can support you in the work that you're doing, because most of us are trained lawyers and we can support you through that. So it's also a matter of you identifying what sort of work you're interested in. Yeah, does that make sense? And I'm hoping with the legal fellowship, we'll have someone here on the ground permanently. So Salman's obviously here on our board of advisors, and we've got other senior lawyers in Lahore and Islamabad who are working with us. But I do hope that once we've identified a fellow and we have a permanent ground presence, we'll definitely be able to do a lot more work.
Hello, my name is Anwar Jamal Kidwai, and for 40 years I have done my banking and also registered as a lawyer. I have studied law and I'm more keen to find out something interesting on labor laws and unions. But I am slightly discouraged by your statement that you don't want to go to lower courts. So, I mean, there's one question I would like to ask.
Yeah. It's actually not that we don't want to go to lower courts. It's because the organization has to develop incrementally. So, sorry, I'm going to use the India example again, because that's where we've done most of our work. But what we found is, we decided to work at the High Court level because of the types of lawyers that we were working with and the types of cases. Now, after 6 years, we've reached a point where we feel we can make an excursion into the trial court. I mean, a lot of you will have been to the lower courts and understand how they work, right? It's a totally different beast. So we need to be prepared and have the right type of lawyers on our network to actually go to the lower court. The other issue is that in terms of funding, etc., we have to be realistic. And yes, at one level, we're providing pro bono legal advice, but how realistic is it to expect lawyers at the lower court level to provide their services for free at this stage, right? And I'm sure a lot of lawyers will understand what I'm talking about. It's something that we are working towards. It won't happen overnight.
Actually, I did my law after my retirement. And I have got at least 15 lawyers, young lawyers.
Yeah.
And they are very good at their work. But I am asking this question especially from you, that why you are leaving the lower courts, where there's more problems lying in the lower court, and pro bono work, of course, I mean, from the bottom up, I would say.
Yeah.
Sir, can I just take that question? It's we have two constraints. One is the lawyers that we work through. So iProbono won't be able to get into the lower courts at all unless we have lawyers there. And if you have lawyers, then we can have a foothold there. We are constrained. That's awesome.
Get them to sign up. Great.
And then number two, the other constraint is having a requisite number of issues that lawyers can support. So these 15 lawyers, we don't want to inundate them with, there's 20 cases, take them all. So if you are able to vet those cases for us, we'd be very happy to operate in this space. Obviously, the understanding is we can't intervene at multiple levels, at too many levels. But that's how we sort of get into new sectors. Also, some of the sectors that we are very happy to get into are, say, environment, where the obstacles are not that very many. In a place like human rights law, or if you're getting into sort of the more securitized zones of national security policy, NGOs operate there also. We're not terribly sure we want to get in there just yet, simply because that space is covertized, it's very volatile, we cannot ensure security for lawyers. So we don't want to take on work that will, threaten the security of lawyers as well, unless they operate at the Supreme Court level, right? And in that respect, a lawyer like Amir Bilal Sufi can ensure his own security, for example, but not junior lawyers. So these are the constraints of the field that we have. I'd like to hear from somebody if there's expertise on intellectual property rights in the room. Or any other question from this side? Or here?
मेरा नाम हमीद है। एजुकेशन के हवाले से बात की गई। मैं सिर्फ ये कहूँ कि जब मोहतरमा की सेकंड टर्म थी गवर्नमेंट की, तो उन्होंने एजुकेशन टास्क फोर्स बनाई और उनके चेयरमैन को कहा कि आप इंटीरियर सिंध में जाएं कि क्यों एजुकेशन रूबा जवाल है, डिक्लाइन पे है। तो बता रहे थे कि मैं एक स्कूल में गया, मैंने कहा अटेंडेंस रजिस्टर ले आए टीचर्स का कि देखो कि टीचर भी आते हैं, तो उसमें एक जगह पे थंब इम्प्रेशन था, उसने सिग्नेचर की जगह पे टीचर ने अंगूठा लगाया था। तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैं इन मोहतरम से मिलना चाहता हूँ कि ये सिग्नेचर साइन भी नहीं कर सकते हैं। तो वो आए तो उनसे पूछा कि आपने साइन की जगह पे अंगूठा लगाया है? तो उन्होंने कहा कि साईं मैं तो स्कूल में चौकीदार था। तो बड़े साईं ने कहा कि इसको भी उस्ताद बनाओ, तो मेरा तो कसूर नहीं है। तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैंने कहा बिल्कुल आपका कसूर नहीं है। बात यह है कि कितने सेंट माइकल, सेंट पैट्रिक स्टूडेंट्स को एकोमोडेट कर सकेंगे। मैं समझता हूँ कि एजुकेशन ये गवर्नमेंट की जिम्मेदारी है। यकीनन इससे मसला मिनिमाइज तो हो सकता है, लेकिन सॉल्यूशन जो है कि मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन को इस पे मजबूर किया जाए कि क्वालिटी ऑफ एजुकेशन दें, तब ही सॉल्यूशन सॉल्व हो सकता है मसला। थैंक यू।
सर, आप कोई एनजीओज़ को जानते हैं जो इस डोमेन में काम कर रहे हों एजुकेशन के, जिनको आप कनेक्ट करना चाहें हमसे, जो इस इशू पे, अगर आपके जहन में ऐसी कोई एनजीओ आए और जिसकी वजह से हमारा थीमेटिक पोर्टफोलियो भी बढ़ सके, आप ज़रूर हमें रेफ़र कीजिए। जी, multiple organizations, but Punjab based, or I'm not familiar with Sindh. Any other questions in the room?
There's not a question. My name is Dr. Minhaj, and I am basically a health management consultant, and I just wanted to offer my services to young lawyers if they want to have some input in terms of cases that they're dealing with health management. So I'm more than happy to offer them some kind of support or guidance that they're looking for. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. I'd love to talk to you about that afterwards as well, because I think young lawyers really do need a lot of support, and I think that both Salman and I, in the discussions that we've had over the last year or so, we've really felt the lack of support for young lawyers, actually, where a lot of them have even said that, their first day in court, they're not given any support from senior lawyers, and they sort of turn up there and the judges are really difficult, and it's very tough to sort of progress your career. So any support for young lawyers, I think, is very welcome.
And my question is, my reason of coming over here is just see, because in West there are a lot of consumer societies. Unfortunately, we don't have any consumer society over here who can fight for the rights of the consumers who are suffering with different issues in Pakistan. So if there could be a group of panels who could have worked towards in terms of consumer protection issues and raise voice, that was my main reason of coming over here at this forum. Thank you.
That's interesting. Actually, I do have a question. I mean, we've got the Sales of Goods Act, etc. in England. What's the equivalent legislation here in Pakistan, if any? It's the same thing, right? Yeah, okay, interesting.
But it's interesting also how a lot of young lawyers said that we'd like to work on legal research. And so that's an area that we are very enthusiastic about, because like a lot of exactly this area that you're mentioning doesn't have enough. I have read of journal articles here, or even articles in the newspaper, but I'm not sure whether that turns into a critical mass of people who, put that kind of litigation in the courts. So if there's enthusiasm in the room on research, we'd like to build that in as well.
Sure. So you said for a lot of the things that we're talking about that, we assisted at this level or we did. So I'm guessing that iProbono, of course, has an in-house panel of lawyers. But then from what I understand, is it correct that you actually, when you're talking about assisting, in specific cities or countries, you're doing that through your affiliated lawyers as opposed to iProbono themselves? So
again, a good question. Actually, you know what I might do is might just show you our website. It kind of explains it quite well. Let me see if I can do this. I'm technologically challenged. I just want to get the whole, if you could get the front page of the iProbono website where people register. Yeah, that would be really helpful. So Salman's just going to try and get the website up. So basically what happens is that if you're an interested lawyer, you register online, and that's how we started as an electronic network. So there's a form that lawyers fill in. They fill in their interests. So when I signed up to iProbono, I put in my name, I put in the name of my firm, I put in my interests, which happened to be immigration, human rights, and judicial review. Other lawyers might be interested in family law, some might be interested in labor law, employment law, education law. And we've got 50,000 lawyers in our network with various interests, etc. Then on the other hand, we've got NGOs that we do a lot of outreach to get onto our network, and they also have a registration panel, which is separate from the lawyers, and they're asked different questions. NGOs will then post projects onto our system. So a project could be anything from what I've just described, review of an HR policy, to Huck, for example, who might contact us and say, look, we've got this child who was abused and got 50,000 compensation, and we want to challenge that compensation. So a project can range from anything. So we've got that project on our system. We will then either be able to identify a lawyer immediately, or if we don't have an immediate idea, we will search our network. I don't think we've ever had a time when we haven't managed to match someone. I'll give you another example of a really basic project that we did in Lahore for the Justice Project Pakistan, who defend prisoners on death row. And especially when the moratorium on the death penalty was lifted in Pakistan, they had a lot of work happening. They had piles of papers in Arabic. They needed them translated, and they needed someone with legal knowledge to translate them from Arabic into Urdu and Arabic into English. So we helped them identify a translator who was based at the School of Oriental and African Studies in the UK. And this all happened via the online network. Okay, so that's how the online network works. Then sort of for the more sophisticated litigation work in the High Court, we have the panel of lawyers. Let me think of a recent example. So a recent example would be, which is just happening yesterday, in fact. We got the lawyers into our offices who sat with two of the lawyers who work for iProbono, so lawyers from another firm, and they sat with the client at our offices and sort of developed a case plan. So that's the sort of in-person interaction. Now, obviously, the project in other countries, in London, for example, and in India, we're far more advanced. But I'm really hoping that in Pakistan, we can get to that level. And I think Salman mentioned that we're not here to reinvent the wheel. I think there's some amazing pro bono work happening here, we'll be meeting up with people in Karachi who've been doing pro bono work in a really sort of established way for 30 years. We're hoping to work with them. In Lahore, we're working with AGHS. So I don't think that we're pretending that we're the first people ever to do this, but we really want to assist and capacity build and use the sort of modern technology of the internet. I mean, I'm an oldie, you guys a lot of you are very young and have sort of grown up with the internet, so really use technology to help us with this work. I'm trying to think of other sort of examples of how we've connected. So I think I've used the student example, the legal translation example, the litigation example, and there are several others. Yeah.
Do we have more questions in the room?
Okay. There's someone here, Salman. Oh, sorry.
There's one at the back. We'll just take that.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ghulam Asghar Pathan.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Oh yeah, I can see you as
hi.
well. Yeah.
It's okay, thanks.
Yeah, I've got one question and one suggestion at the same time.
Thanks. Yeah.
The question just belongs to the gentleman over here who was speaking about the trial court. Is that in recent days that you are more able to get judgments easily from trial courts as compared to high court because of huge influx of writ petitions and so many cases at high court level. So and there isn't any kind of a like threat available all the time at lower stages. I mean, because that's the most easiest way to do the work. And the suggestion was about that why don't you consult with the bar associations working in different areas of laws, for example, Karachi Tax Bar Association, Commercial and Banking Bar Association, and there are a few more. I mean, the purpose would it serve that it will give them as well a habit to do work in a structural way. Because everyone, I mean, for example, I'm a lawyer, I've opened my own law firm from last month, and I'm doing pro bono because I haven't heard anything. Because it's very complicated to earn in this circumstances the way it is. Pakistan has been ranked, I mean, in one of the lowest earning profession for lawyers internationally. So I think almost every lawyer in this city or in this country is doing pro bono one way or another. So the need is to make it in a bit structured way. And one of the biggest, I would say, the defaulter in this way would be the Pakistan Bar Council, which has never been approached. Because you're talking about pro bono, there isn't any training structure once you have passed the LLB. They just take you everywhere and just seniors ask you to see and learn by yourself. So I'm not sure what standards would you be maintaining for doing the pro bono. There are quite a lot of issues.
No, I think that's a really good point. And actually, I did contact the Lahore High Court pro bono unit. They have a pro bono unit within the bar, but nobody's got it. Yeah, they even have a pot of money, which nobody really knows what happens to that pot of money for pro bono work. But it's essential to work with the bar associations. I'm still trying to get meetings with them. I haven't approached the bar associations in Sindh as yet, but certainly in Pakistan we're trying. And in Sri Lanka, actually, we started our work in Sri Lanka by working through the bar associations. And what the bar associations across Sri Lanka have done is they've introduced compulsory pro bono for all lawyers. And actually, I have a question. Like you mentioned that you do pro bono work. What sort of pro bono? Give us an example. Yeah.
Wait for 6 months, my shots are
Okay,
coming.
okay.
I would like to share a small information.
Could we have, there's one question here for someone who hasn't asked a question as yet, so if we can have that first and then we can move back to you. But I think I think just also following on from that, of course, lawyers need to make a living, and you've got to run a business. Ultimately, you're running your own business, but it's about managing time, working with other people, so you can find that time to do meaningful pro bono work as well. Yeah, exactly, and hopefully that's what iProbono will be able to provide. Yeah, definitely. And I'm hoping that, one of the things that we're going to ask our fellow to do is to engage more closely with the bar associations. So fingers crossed. Yeah.
Sorry, this is just to clarify something. I think you may have raised it before I walked in. But when you guys match, do you match within a team of lawyers, or is it just individuals? The reason I'm asking is because you guys want to work with junior lawyers, and if either they may not have the time, but if they do have the time, they may not have the capacity, and so being paired with someone senior may allow them to not only gain exposure, but then also do the work that's required.
Actually, it's a bit of both. So I think Salman gave an example earlier of a project that we did with Pakistan Youth Change Advocates. There were 2 junior lawyers working on it, and they had their work checked by a senior partner. Then in London, we had a senior partner in an immigration law firm who was overseeing the work of a team of lawyers. However, if it's a more established lawyer with, say, 4 to 5 years post-qualification experience, they are usually, a lot of them take on the projects themselves. So it really depends on the lawyer. I mean, I know that for the first few projects that I did for iProbono, I actually got a colleague to help me with them. Because of time, so I did the initial drafting. It was just on some really basic immigration appeal applications. I did the I did the initial drafting, and then I got someone else to review it for me, just check some of the legislation. So I do actually feel, and I think I was saying this earlier, teamwork really helps when you're doing pro bono work because of the time. But if it's a contract review, I mean, most decent contract lawyers can just blitz that, and a lot of them do on their own. So it just depends. Yeah.
I'd like to share some interesting information.
Certainly, yeah.
The interiors.
Yeah.
What is happening? That there are a lot of vacancies at the High Court. They cannot be filled in because the experience of High Court is a must for any junior lawyer. But in the interior, people work at the lower courts and they earn more. They don't want to go to High Court because for their earning, their bread and butter. So I mean, there's one information. There a vacancy and there is not currently filled with those vacancies because the people work at the lower court. So I'll still insist on the lower courts.
Yeah, I think your point is very clear, and I think going forward, we will certainly explore working more efficiently. I mean, the bail application training that we gave earlier this year in Qasur was actually aimed at lower court lawyers. So, you know, I think that sort of work we can definitely start, which is providing training. And we can see how we can move on with that. But I totally see your point, and I appreciate it as well. Yes, I agree, and I think a lot of the international aid agencies are very keen on doing that, but yeah. Do we have a question?
Yes, right here. So I remember you mentioning about the intellectual property law earlier, and then we never got to talk about it. So just wondering about the intellectual property law. Do you have any examples of cases, and in what capacity have you worked in intellectual property law so far?
Sure. Couple of examples. So first example I'll take from Pakistan, which is we did a piece of work for Reporters Without Borders on the new cybercrime laws, or the sort of amendments, etc., that took place to the bill, and so Reporters Without Borders wanted us to do some work on that. So we actually got in touch with an intellectual property firm here in Karachi, and they helped us with some of the research. So that was a research-based project. In India, the iProbono office is housed by a firm of intellectual property lawyers. So they work on things ranging from trademark registration to recently they just fought a case actually on behalf of some students who had a case filed against them by, I think it was OUP Publishing, who had taken a case against some students for using complete photocopies of their books during classes. And we sort of represented the students in that case. So that's a sort of range of intellectual property law. Was there anything specific that you were thinking of? Or?
No, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Like in what capacity,
Yeah.
in what range of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the legislation that you were talking about, the cybercrime law, so you guys were working on its draft?
We weren't working on the drafts. We were working on a piece of research that Reporters Without Borders were doing on cybercrime laws across South Asia, in fact. And so for the Pakistan case study, we assisted with that research.
Do you have an opinion on the cybercrime law?
Me personally, well, the lawyers that we were working on called it the cyber Talibanization law, and I would say that it's a real shame that we haven't really taken the opportunity to develop a law which actually protects people. I recently went to, I think that the bill that was submitted has come out in a very different form from what it was initially envisaged to be. I'm not an intellectual property lawyer. I don't really work in the cybercrime field, but that's what I feel. I mean, the lawyers we were working with also had their own opinion, and we'd be happy to share the research with anyone who's interested. I recently went to a conference on cybercrime law and child sex abuse, because that's something that we're quite interested in and we've been working on, and we're sort of developing our expertise in. And it's quite shocking how legislation across South Asia fails to tackle crimes against children on the internet, etc. So I think that there definitely needs to be strengthening in that capacity. That's a personal opinion, but yeah.
Is there a question?
I just
I'm not even sure if my mic works. Anyway, yeah.
Okay. I just like to ask a question. Is there anything you guys are doing in regards to inclusion in education at workplace for disabled people? There's a lot to do in Pakistan. We don't have any clear laws, anything working in the education sector, especially if it comes to learning disabilities, and there are, those screenings available for the students to have inclusive education. There are special schools, but I think they're not doing enough. There are plenty of students struggling, and there's a lot to do. There's a lot of potential to do in this field.
We're not doing anything specifically in Pakistan on that at the moment. I know, and again, I'm really sorry to use the India example, but yeah, we are trying at iProbono. We have actually drafted 2 disability rights policies for 2 NGOs, and in our own office, we actually make sure that we always have an intern from I'm thinking of the politically correct way of putting it, but from within the disabled community, because to make our organization more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I have noticed that, we have an intern who's on a wheelchair, and it's really difficult for him to get into the office because we have steps going down, we don't have a ramp. So we've advised an organization on how to make their office more friendly to their disabled staff, and we're now facing that challenge, and how do we make our own office. So I think in terms of employment policies and those sort of policies, we could definitely assist at this stage, and it would be interesting actually to see how we could engage with more sort of nuanced projects in that field.
Well, I'm setting up an organization about this, and I'd definitely like to get in touch.
That would be great, yeah. Be in touch about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd just like to share one perspective there. This is an organization called Asset Survivors, based out of Islamabad, who we were in touch with last year, and who work with not just asset survivors, but people with disabilities as well. So one of the things that they did bring up is, this area. Whether or not they need capacity there, they haven't identified, but we are working with some form of disability, and that's, through not education, which you mentioned, for disabled people, but other challenges, so livelihoods, etc. So there is one great organization by that name. But if you can identify, like you said, you're setting up an organization yourself. If you can identify organizations that need help, that need support, assistance, we are, this is the idea, to please connect them to us.
And often what happens is, just to follow on from that, often what happens is that an NGO will contact us and say, look, do this, just review this policy for us, and then that will lead to another piece of work, which will lead to another piece of more complicated work. And what's quite nice is when lawyers build up relationships with the NGOs. So in London, we've developed a counsel program where lawyers almost mentor the NGO and develop long-lasting relationships with them. So a member of staff at the NGO can just call up and say, look, I've got this problem. Do you think this is something that I need proper advice on, or can you just advise me on the phone? and then you won't get a bill for £250 per hour at the end of that, you know? So I think that's also something that in an ideal world could happen here as well. It's taken a couple of years to establish, but I would envisage it working quite well over here.
Another area we're quite interested in is heritage preservation, and we have one architect in the room who was speaking earlier about the challenges there. This is an area we'd like to get into and learn, you know, what obstacles are there for heritage preservation, etc. Would you like to share a perspective on how difficult that field is?
This particular topic, okay, I can only link it back up to my own thesis project, which was a heritage conservation project. And I was trying to take up a building facade, which is completely stranded, and the whole plot behind it is empty, and just use it to create some kind of an artistic dialogue. And the whole, the thesis statement behind it was to revitalize something which is a physical artifact, actually, which links up to the historic stories of the city. But I'm not sure, I didn't go to, because it was an academic project, I didn't go to the level of dealing with the legal issues, but just generally on a jury level, on a discussion level, it was really, the struggle was, how do I make it economically feasible? How do I make it viable? How do I create, because there was a very big disconnect between the artistic importance that project can have, as opposed to how will I legally or business-wise in those properties, because the site was in Sadr and the parking was an issue. But I couldn't link it up because there were so many layers which were not my profession that were coming up, and I was getting caught up again and again. So that's the closest that I've gone to heritage. But the last question actually raised something which is a non-architectural thing I was wondering about. You guys are talking about NGOs or lawyers, two people who are basically approaching you that, okay, fine, we want assistance in a certain category, or we want to assist in a certain category. Do you have any kind of a system going on, or an idea open to the fact that maybe some entities do run which maybe need some kind of a legal raid, you know, in terms of, and I might be very ignorant with that perspective, but I'm just saying, speaking from the disability thing, actually destructs, like vocational centers which actually abduct students, and, you know, the families are paying so much, and I'm talking from a very personal perspective. I can't share the name at this forum right now. But as to how their policies are shaped up and what they're supposed to deliver when the family are actually involved and paying so much money and getting the child enrolled, what are their, as a business running, and if they're taking so much money from us, then what are they supposed to actually deliver? Because if you're a concerned family member, max you can go and say, okay, fine, schedule an appointment for me, but that's it. And if I am aware of it, that what are the possible services you should be providing to this child that I've enrolled, even that's not helping me, because they're so, they're so ignorantly sitting that, all right, you know, this is what we can deliver. And this is just one thing, and I'm talking about a case in which I feel that the business is running, but it's just the policy around it is so, it's so loose that they actually get away with it. And coming to the arts fraternity, some NGOs and design intervention exercises happen in which you go to the rural areas, you get some craftsmen, you get all of, and you do these design intervention exercises, you create a fusion between crafts and modern arts, and in that also a lot of exploitation happens of the craft. And so do you guys have any kind of an eye open towards these kind of raids?
We haven't really conducted any raids as such, but I understand what you're saying, and it's an interesting point. We ultimately work at a very sort of demand-based level, so demand from lawyers and demands from organizations. However, what we are starting to do is, one of the fields that we're expanding in is our women's rights programs, and through that, our human trafficking work. And we're working on supply chains. Just in terms of not becoming very technical, but supply chains are basically employment supply chains in businesses. So making sure that businesses don't employ victims of trafficking and are very sort of aware of the legislation on trafficking, and all employees are employed in a fair and just way. So I suppose in terms of raids and keeping an eye on how organizations are run, that's something that we're doing research into, and we've got lawyers who are sort of looking into specific businesses. But it would, I think, in the example that you're giving, it would be very much someone saying, oh, there's this organization, would you please look into their policies? We've had a problem with them. Yeah. We would probably engage with, it's complicated because you have to contact the organization, and you also have to get, unless there's a direct case of negligence and there's some sort of damage to an individual, it's very difficult to start any sort of case, right? So you'd have to get the permission of the organization to do an audit of their policies.
And another thing, there's one example that I can think of. It's the lady who's been the monitor, the person who's going around restaurants and checking out whether they're clean or not. She's been recently sacked. In essence, it's assisting a monitor. If a monitor says, I'm an organization, I need assistance for such and such, we can step in. But we cannot take activist positions and sort of conduct raids on our own, or even go as far as creating best practices. We're not in a place to recommend things, and like Mariam said, it's demand based. So if an organization steps forward, says this is what we need, and even at that, we'll have to do a due diligence of what that organization is about. So if we don't like their politics, if they're operating if they haven't paid their tax, for example, we will not be assisting their tax regime, or that kind of stuff. So there is a due diligence.
And actually, that's an important point that Salman mentioned, and I haven't mentioned yet, is that with each NGO that signs up to us, we have a sort of system of checking. And similarly with the lawyers, like we always check their complaints record on the relevant regulation authorities to see that they're functioning, they're viable, and etc.
I just wanted to ask, what is your business model? Like how you generate your funding, or is it sustainable idea to do that?
I think I mentioned earlier that, so we started off as a completely 100% volunteer-based organization. We're very dependent on volunteers. I myself sort of volunteered for 2 years, and all our lawyers on our network work for free. In terms of our office running costs, and we're very sort of transparent, we've got all the information on our website. In London, we're really lucky. We're housed by a corporate law firm who provide us with office space for free, everything from photocopying to IT services, printing, whatever we need, courier services. We're part of their CSR. They also second one of their permanent members of staff to us. So our relationship director in London, Benita Moody, is seconded to us by Field Fisher Waterhouse. Now, obviously, we need funding for our projects and to employ our staff. So we've got a rolling grant from the Ford Foundation. In India, we were being run by Ford directly, but now because of the Indian government's crackdown on foreign funding, we don't have that anymore. So we rely on individual grants from law firms in India. So there are 3 big law firms in India, Khaitan, Amarchand, and Luthra, and we're really grateful for their support. Similarly, our office space is shared with an intellectual property law firm. They've very kindly given space to our 10 employees and 10 members of staff, including me. Our Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh work was funded by the Commonwealth Foundation. And the Pakistan work is being progressed also by the Ford Foundation. But yeah, we're like any other organization, we're always looking for grant money and fundraising, etc. Well, we do generate our own funding, and we're pretty secure for the next 3 to 5 years. And Field Fisher Waterhouse, similarly the IP practice in India, and our network across South Asia is pretty solid. We're pretty confident that we've got the support that we need. I would say that the kind of assistance that we get from Field Fisher in London, just to have a running office that we can work through, it's really the core of what we need, because we're so dependent on volunteers who've given their time and work for free.
But funding has no bearing on the thematic areas we get into in Pakistan.
That's true. Yeah.
It's completely independent. We are happy to evolve our own agenda. The only sort of broad consensus we have is maybe to prioritize organizations that work with women and children. And that's really up to us who approach, and that's what we've been doing, in scoping over the last year. But other than that, Pakistan is a very different market, so to speak, from India or South Asia overall. So our agenda is our own. It's led by a board that is all Pakistani. We're getting into areas, working even sort of sussing out lawyers or organizations whose reputation we don't necessarily know. But part of our due diligence is to ask others, what do you think about such and such person? Can we take this on? Is this the right time? Is this the right domain to step into, etc.? Those are all sort of things that we have on our, as part of our considerations, we do think of. But the money doesn't necessarily, in fact, not at all, does not tie with the areas that we are getting into or the organizations that we link up with.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that, we're not getting any funding from any governments. And just by way of example, our child rights work progressed because literally HUC, the organization that I was talking about, had taken on this little girl, Amal's case, and they needed help. And it was just a cause, I think, that resonated with all of us, with the entire team. So we took it on. And then from Amal's case, we got several other cases, which then built up to Akash's case, where we had a really resounding success. And we had one of Delhi's top Supreme Court lawyers helping us draft our papers. So it was just actually everyone getting together and thinking this is a cause that we want to work with. And similarly with the human trafficking work, I did a lot of human trafficking work through my immigration work in England, which is why I'm sort of developing that area. It's very case by case, what sort of work comes to us. And that's why Salman was saying, I think Pakistan will be very different from all the other countries. In Bangladesh, it just so happens that, I don't know if you were reading about the blogger's case in the organization called Roopban. Roopban happened to be on our books as an organization that we'd done some, I think again, we'd reviewed an employment policy for them, and they just randomly got in touch with us after their director was attacked and killed by an extremist, and they said, can you help us with some other work? And we don't actually publicize that work very much because we keep it under the radar, as it were. But it's really very dependent on who contacts us, and then if we have the capacity from within our network to assist. And I have a feeling that's how it's going to develop in Pakistan as well. So you do not currently have office spaces in Pakistan? No, we work virtually in Pakistan. Yeah. Sorry? Are you looking for one though? So I had mentioned actually that we're going to be recruiting a fellow, and it's a paid fellowship. We've managed to cobble some funds together to carry our work forward over here in Pakistan. So we have a presence. We've got 2 interns, haven't we, working with us. Salman is a sort of advisor here, and we've got a wider advisory board. And we're looking to expand by starting with a fellow and seeing how that goes. And the fellow will basically be responsible for the core work, which is project matching. They'll be supported by the global office in London, and to whatever extent we can provide support from the India office. And I think that's our starting point here. And of course, I'm also very involved in the project matching, and so is Salman. So the core of that work is continuing in Pakistan. And I think it also mentioned that we just need lawyers to sign up. We need a lot more lawyers. I think that's basically what we're doing over here. Yeah, and information about the fellowship can be found on our website, and you can also email me about it if you know of anyone who's interested, or if you are interested yourselves. Yeah. I think in terms of summary, it's been really great to have some of your suggestions, and what I'm really keen not to do is to make this into just a conversation, but to really move on from the conversation. So we started in Islamabad, we've been to Lahore, and now we're in Karachi, and I'd really like to keep in touch with people who are interested. So I'll pass my card around. Please feel free to contact me or Salman, and we will be sending you, we've got a newsletter that comes out through our UK and India offices. we'll keep you in touch with our work. But I think the main thing is that we will be working with organizations in Karachi who are already leading in pro bono work. And I think a gentleman suggested being in touch with the bar associations, etc. So we're hopefully going to be working with them as well in greater capacity. And I mean, similarly, you mentioned your student organization. We can definitely provide support in that sense. So while at one level we're strengthening our work in Pakistan, we do have the global network that is already working really successfully. So I'm hoping that we can replicate that here with everybody's support. So thanks so much. It's been a really great discussion. Thank you.